right. We're going to get started with the Board of Commissioners work session on the budget. Thanks, everybody. Well, we got a good crowd. Thanks for everybody that could stick around. Appreciate it. I will hand it over to the County Administrator, Al Vandenberg. Oh, I wanted to say we did order lunch. We did expect the meeting might go a little bit longer than it did. So I think lunch is going to be here at 11:30-ish, approximately. All right. So feel free to grab some if you'd like, or we can eat following. Al, go ahead. Thanks.
Certainly, we welcome the opportunity to give more input into the recipe before we bake the budget so that it's something that has a softer landing when the board takes it up for deliberation. So with that, so what we'll be talking about today, process, how we do personnel additions, the 5-year capital plan, operating budgets. The main purpose of today is to give you a peek at all the capital requests we've received. I'll explain the process of how that ends up on a final list that's baked into the 5-year capital improvement plan. And then also, I think, for certain, I think the base level of input we want to make sure we get today are whether there are capital items that the board desires to see in the budget, as Commissioner Teal and I discussed. And perhaps they will make it in the next year's capital improvement plan, but at least you'll see where they land from a staff perspective when that budget comes back to you for approval. So with that, so as just to kind of just remind us all of role, the board sets a policy, ultimately develops and approves the strategic plan, sets a budget parameters, approves annual grant funding, sets and holds a public hearing, adopts the General Appropriation Act, and ultimately sets the millage rates to be levied. So that's kind of the state law kind of responsibility that a county commissioner has. Administrator controller role is to recommend the budget parameters, do the budget preparation, and that's personnel, budget, capital, and operating. Do the budget presentations, transmits or submits the General Appropriation Act for the Board of Commissioners for approval, and then ultimately control of expenditures on the General Appropriations Act throughout the fiscal year. So that's kind of just a summary of the duties that myself and staff do have. And with a note, I should say we have Jeff Dode here, our Fiscal Services Director and CFO, and Keith Highboer is to his left. And Keith was promoted this year to the Budget Director position and has been doing a phenomenal job in that regard. So when we look at the personnel requests, we focus on critical needs, impact on the general fund. Are there other viable alternatives? Can a department do some restructuring in order to meet those needs instead of adding a new position? We all understand that new positions are expensive and they come with benefits, and those are expensive long-term additions to our budget. So we don't take that lightly. We take that very seriously as we review those requests. We look at the duration of the position. Sometimes it's for a specific purpose that isn't forever. We also look at whether it is tied to strategic priorities that have been identified in the board's strategic plan, impact on service levels, mandated services. Sometimes a mandate will land and we have to create a position to meet the mandate. And sometimes it's funded and sometimes it's not. For example, in the clerk's office, they had the mandate of running the new expungement process, and yet there was no money that came with that. And so, that's a constant battle we have with Lansing over my entire career has been, you're the state. You can make us do whatever you want us to do, but send us some money per the Headley Act. And if you would do that and not violate the Constitution, that would be greatly appreciated by your county government. So, but it's a constant battle. I have conversations about that monthly at least. So, we had 30.2 positions requested. There's 16.70 that will be recommended for addition. Those go on the February 21, I can't say legislative anymore, so the Operations Committee agenda, and the Operations and Policy Committee would approve the new personnel to be included in the budget, which later all comes up for board approval. I mean, this year, the theme is still implementing the sheriff's road patrol and corrections staffing studies. So you'll see that that's really where most of those come in. And there are many times when we meet with the department where it's just the priority isn't there yet. It's something that's important. It maybe can wait a year or two, but certainly we do our best to make sure that the positions are there that we need to provide excellent customer service and to meet the mandates of the state and the strategic plan of the board. The 5-year capital plan, as Commissioner Kallman noted earlier, the board has had a longstanding policy now of allocating 0.2 mils of general property tax for capital improvements. And Kent County has a policy of $25,000 minimum cost for an item to be included in the capital budget. So it could be something that by the description of it, you might say, oh, that belongs in the capital budget. In reality, it costs less than $25,000, in which case, if it's approved, it would be in the operating budget, not the capital budget. So departments submit capital requests over a 5-year time frame, including the ranking of project priority for them. So if we get 10 items from one department, they will list them in the priority of importance to them. And that very well impacts where something will land in the 5-year plan. Obviously, we need to be flexible. If a grant that we didn't even know about all of a sudden is offered by the state or the feds and it applies to a certain project, that could jump that ahead with board approval to an earlier time in the plan. So the ranking of projects by the CIP program review team is health and safety, is external funding available to help defray the project cost? What are the impacts on operations and ongoing costs? The life expectancy of the improvement, and also alignment with Board of Commissioners strategic priorities. So the CIPRT, the team, recommends capital projects to the county administrator, and the county administrator submits their inclusion to finance and the Board of Commissioners, and then finance would approve CIP for inclusion in the annual budget. So I'm going to send these both ways so you can take a look at what those look like. So this is the raw data. This is what's been submitted. This process is ongoing. The team will be meeting even in the next couple weeks to start to winnow these down into the recommendation that will go to the Finance Committee.
Al,
Yes.
these are all things that we've already approved as a commission, is that correct?
Well, okay, so
It looks, they all look familiar.
you've approved them in a plan that goes over 5 years. Not all, but most.
Okay.
I'm going to phone a friend here.
I think they're on the computer too. I don't know if you want to pull them
Oh,
up on
okay.
the screen or not.
I didn't. Where are they on the screen? There at the bottom?
That's the future.
So I don't know which one you're looking at, this one or this one?
That one right now, yeah.
This one?
Yep.
That's tiny.
Great, so, sorry. So to answer your question, none of these have been approved, I'm sorry, none of these have been approved at this point. These were just submitted last week by the department heads. You may have seen some of these in previous years and the out years, but that first list of 2026 is what you'll be acting on this year. And the out years are projects that you have to keep in the back of your mind for additional funding, things like that in the future. So no, none of these have been approved at this point.
So it's a fresh list
Fresh
for our,
list.
for our
Correct.
fresh eyes to look at.
Correct.
Okay.
You could look at it, so in the 5-year plan, you're not actually approving an expenditure for 2029, but it's the best kind of forward-looking 5-year budget we can give you for when that would happen. And then depending on department priority funding, a number of factors, it might go from 29 to 26, depending on those factors. But at least it gives an idea of what departments have said they're going to need over the next 5 years.
Is there any order to this list?
So these were the orders submitted by the departments and their ranking. So if you look at like facilities, the courthouse roof preservation of $806,500, that was their number one priority ranked
Okay.
project when they
Great.
submitted it. So,
Great.
and it
Thank
goes
you.
down the list from
Okay,
there.
that makes sense.
I did want to mention something Commissioner Coleman brought up, the .2 mils. That's a minimum. Since I've been here, we've always done more than the minimum. So we kind of like to keep it at the minimum so we don't have to, if we put it at a .3 or a .4, then we're kind of stuck to that max. But we've often, well, we have every year since I've been here, like I said, done like a .25 or even a .23 or a .3 amount to capital. So
If I can just ask a quick question on that, like that seems reasonable to have a policy lower than we think we need, so we're not like forcing ourselves into something if circumstances change, but how is that mill rate determined in a given year?
So typically, we'll go through, the committee will review all these projects and decide which ones like mandatory for this year. And then we look at the funding, how much do we have? So it fits with the overall budget too. So if, let's say we have 10 million projects, and it's going to take .3 mils to fund 10 million, can we afford .3 mils in the overall budget? Because it has to fit, it's a transfer out to capital. So if we can't afford the .3, it might be a .275 or a .28, depending on what fits in the overall scheme. So it's kind of a give and take as we put the whole budget together.
Yeah, okay, thanks, sir.
I like this format, it's very easy to understand. Thank you.
All right, so why don't I finish the PowerPoint? And then we will come back and see if you have any suggestions for addition for us to keep in mind as the CIP Review Committee continues its work. Okay, these are basically the operating budget guidelines that you've just adopted today. And then this is the chart that was referred to earlier. I think it was Commissioner Coleman referred to the chart as a useful tool that kind of shows the overview of the whole budget process. And then, so I think what we wanted to do is leave as much time as possible. And we are going to do another one of these because the thought was that, it can be a little overwhelming and maybe today we'll start to get the thinking moving and that you'll, so today, that's why I'm saying CIP is kind of the important item today just because the committee is working on it. And I think that, certainly if there's items that we need to be considering, if the sooner we can know those, the better so we can fit them in where it makes sense to fit in.
I have a question.
Yeah, just real quick, Wally, before, so Al, if you can, I'm sorry, Commissioner Bujak, if you can just reiterate what you're trying to get from us, what's most helpful from us today in terms
Okay,
of feedback. And then, Wally, I'll let you start kind of the questions and we'll kind of formalize it a little bit and go from there.
I think today there's three things that I would hope to walk out of here with. Number one is some kind of clarity on the budget process, that we understand what we're doing, when we're doing it. Number two would be input into capital items. I think, the big one that a lot of folks remember who were on the board, I think it was a year before I came back here, but it was commissioners really wanted to see heated restrooms in the park system. and it did not make it in the budget, and so there was some controversy, I think, during the budget process. So I think it's really trying to get the mind of the commission, and the capital items would be important today. Not to say if you walked out of here today and said, oh darn, I really wanted to mention this one thing, that you can't shoot us a email and that it wouldn't get consideration. But obviously, timeline, the longer we go, the less likely something's going to be in the 26th year, unless it, so. Then the third thing would be, I mean, we can start taking ideas on the rest of the budget too. I mean, if there's things that we should keep in mind while we're preparing the rest of the budget, there will be, as I said, my guess is the next time we do this, another input session, it'll be focused more on the operating budget. And I'm really hoping we have a lot more clarity from our partners at the state and federal level as far as, because obviously our budgets could look a lot different and in many different ways depending on what funding we have to run the budget. I mean, just the federal funding alone, if you look at 64, 65 million, somewhere in there, out of $500 million budget, all of a sudden, you know, that's a pretty hefty percentage, and then all the state funding on top of that. So this is going to be, in some sense, I'm guessing a real-time kind of year where we look at what the president's doing, what the Supreme Court's doing, what the state legislature is doing, and do our best to adapt real-time to that. Is that clear?
Yeah, I think that's helpful.
Okay.
Okay, I'll call Commissioner Bujak. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Al, this particular process that you're sharing with us, how long has the county been using this particular process where the entire Board of Commissioners are now involved in looking at this? Is this something, well, how long, can you speak?
So I was surprised when I reread the Uniform Budget and Accounting Act of 1968, how closely our process mirrors what the law says we need to do, which is I need to propose a budget to you after I confer with the department heads. It actually goes to that level in the law, and then the board's job is to review it and approve it. But I think what we found is that as a county, we will function better if you have input into that. And that's why the board's strategic planning is important. That's why sessions like this are important, so that you don't get a budget you're disappointed in, or worse, and we've had some of this too, even since I've been back here, a feeling that maybe staff isn't listening to the board, which has never really been my attitude or my desire, or to have a power trip with the board where we don't, do what you want us to do. But it's more trying to get the board to speak into it at the right time so that we can make sure the budget reflects your priorities.
So this is new then? This is something we've just now?
This actual meeting is new. Yes.
Okay, so for the benefit of the new commissioners who've not, had the purview of, history from the past, you're at ground floor. What we're doing here today is, I highly support what we're doing, because involving all the commissioners and getting their input at this point makes a whole lot of sense. The way it seems like we've done it in the past, that had gone to the Finance Committee, and they did that work and subcommittee work, and we as commissioners got a report that said, these are the findings of that subcommittee, and we recommend that you approve this. And there would be no reason for the entire board at large at that point to ask questions about that subcommittee's work, and we're more inclined to be supportive of that subcommittee and just vote to support it without any opposition. Not that there would be any opposition, but I think that including all of the commissioners at the front end in the way you're doing this, I think this is the best possible way that we can, continue in this process, and I applaud you for doing this.
Well, I'll thank Commissioner Teal, because she's appropriately relentless in seeking opportunities for the board to give input, and that has actually helped me as well, so.
So I just got a clarification then, so we're going to be going.
You flip your mic on, please, Stan. Can you put your mic on, please? Thanks.
I'm sure they can.
Well, I can hear you,
We
but I
have a
don't know.
recording though,
Yeah.
too.
Well, what I'm worried about then, so just look at the CIP, got this whole list of things. As a Board of Commissioner, I know little of what any of this has to do with anything. And you then take that to the whole budget, it's the same thing to a commissioner to handpick this over that, with what little time we've had on it. I'm more concerned about the broader viewpoint from commissioners, and mine is, I'm worried about revenues. And I think not just at the federal, but I think the state government's gonna be falling by, back on their heels. So when it comes to the budget, I'm more concerned about our budget's balanced. There's no new taxes, and the citizens of this county aren't gonna be on the hook for something that happens.
That's a great comment, Commissioner, and I think that's the beauty of the state law even, because I honestly couldn't tell you myself, whether we should do elevator code compliance improvements this year or next year or the following year. And that's why the law requires me actually to consult with staff before I propose a budget to you. And also I think we would not ask commissioners to rank this list, because you would have, most of you at least, would have even less information than me on how to actually rank it. It's more of, are there big picture items like again, a few years ago, wanting heated restrooms in the park system that we need to have in mind so that we can make sure we give you something back that shows how, and as Commissioner Teal said when we met, it may not be the first year, but at least you'll know it's the second year, or wherever the staff believes that should fall, and then you could alter that if you disagree during the budget adoption process.
Go ahead, Commissioner Faber.
Just a couple quick questions. The committee that's going through the process of raking this,
Yes.
according to the timeline, they're meeting 3 to 4 times before it comes back to finance.
Right.
Who's on that committee and kind of who's represented there?
Jeff?
It's a good question, Commissioner. So whoever submits projects is typically on that committee. So it's the facilities director, it's myself, it's the deputy finance director, purchasing, the sheriff, Randy DeBryan typically is their finance person, and Tim from IT, so.
In my office.
And admin, yes, so.
And so the slide that you shared, that there, for lack of a better word, there's some strategy screens that you're using to elevate or rank these things, like alignment to board strategic plan, whether there's grant dollars coming in. Will we be able to see some of that magic?
Yes, you will be able to see
Okay.
that. And so, yeah, that's part of it. We want to be able to show you when we present the pieces of the budget, where it aligns with, for example, the positions that are being added for the staffing studies in the sheriff's office. We'll note that as a board priority because it was in last year's budget, it is in this year's budget, and I'm presuming it will be until that work is completed. So those items we will highlight in some way so you can tie that back.
Great.
And you have to be a little bit careful because some of these things may rank very low by our system, because if it adds a lot of operational costs, it gets a low ranking. If it adds other costs or it's more of a general fund impact, but it may need to be done. So it may rank at the bottom of the list, but we know we can't have failed elevators or whatever that project may be. So that may be included in the list, even though it doesn't rank very high.
Yeah,
So-
I think that's always helpful to sort of say, okay, we're deviating from this for this reason, and there's an asterisk next to it to say, yeah, it's unsafe if we don't do something, even though that's not part of our screen. One other question, if I can. So in last year's budget for capital project funds, we put out about 7-point-something million in capital, and then there was 6 million in strategic capital, so that we totaled almost 14 million. That 6 million, is that part of the 0.2 cap or minimum, sorry? And then what is that and where is it going? Thanks.
We've been using strategic capital lately. Basically, it's surplus. In the general fund at the year-end, we always budget for $6.5 million lap. So a lot of that money doesn't get spent throughout the year, and we know that. So, and we've got the big Fuller project coming up that we know we have to save at least 40 million in strategic capital to pay part cash on that. So if we have excess revenues over expenses that year, and we've done appropriations to strategic over and above the 0.2.
Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead, Commissioner Sparks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to assume that we're going to be mindful spending money on any of the projects when we're planning on moving. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay, so we'll keep that top of mind.
yes.
Okay.
I bumped on that too. I know we're not necessarily going through this line to line, but looking at some of the investments that we might make at 82, as we probably will gear up for sale on that. Also, I don't know what a flapper valve is. I'm assuming that's one of those things that sounds dirty but isn't, but
It's a $75,000 valve, I know that.
it's some valve.
You know, I don't know, and Tim's on vacation, and so we will get that information. What? Oh, Mark, all right.
Mark,
You know what a flapper valve is.
he's the resident,
Unfortunately.
the clubhouse leader on flapper valves in here today.
Facilities Management, Mark Rao. So a flapper valve is part of the fire suppression system. So every year you have to test the system and drain it. And the flapper valve is the main valve that keeps the pressure on the system when it's not to be expended. So it sits there holding the pressure and it drops out and lets the water flow through the buildings. So the problem is the valve is original with the building. You can't get parts, you can't get seals, so we're making it work right now, but when we go to do the test annually, because we're required by law, if it fails and we can't seal it, we got to replace it.
All right, good. That's helpful. I think that obviously that's something that is, pretty critical. Some of the other stuff that we're budgeting out for in that building might
Yeah.
not be as critical.
So to your and Commissioner Sparks' point, while the prosecutor did mention during our department directors meeting last week that there are a few items that he believes we will need to address, because it will be a while before we get to the point of selling 82 Ionia, but we are being very careful about what those investments are. So it'd have to be a real necessity in order to do that.
Thanks. Commissioner Teal.
Can you talk a little bit about what the city-county work plan 2026 is? It looks like there's quite a big investment in that.
Yes.
That one. Or a request for investment, I should say.
Do you have that one, or Mark Rowell? This facility. This facility, right?
Yes, let me start it, I guess. So what that is usually work on this building in the Calder area. We share the facility, obviously, with the city. So they prepare a capital plan and improvements, and we have got to pay our portion of that. So we annually budget a pretty large amount for that. Like, I think this Calder deck is $7-8 million, maybe $10 million to redo this deck and everything they want to do, and we're always a piece of that by a percentage of square footage, so.
But do we get a say in that then? Or is it just they make the plan and we have to
We
pay
have
for
a say in
half? Okay,
Yes.
To a degree.
okay.
It falls in line, it kind of falls in line at the courthouse. They're a tenant there. We come up with our capital improvement projects and we just say, this is what we're going to replace, and then they kind of get it. So it's kind of falls in the same line. It's part of the whole capital thing of following what their guidance and plan is for keeping all this maintained.
Okay.
There have been times when a plan, if our staff disagrees with it, where I've taken it up directly with the city manager. And then I also mentioned that part of the Calder improvements will be paid for by DGRI. And so they also have skin in the game on that one.
Okay, can I have one more?
Yeah, please.
And then I see quite a bit here on the 63rd District Court too. I thought when we added the additional judge, there was a conversation of they were going to try the courtroom juggle for a few years before they made a request. Is this them making the request then? Because I thought we'd be waiting a couple more years since that judge is just getting seated, I don't know, within the month.
The judge is seated already. It's the security of moving the inmates back and forth. That's the whole original plan. It was working because they didn't have the third judge, but now that it is, all the in-custody people transferring through the building unsecure. So they are juggling, but it's just a scheduling thing that we had to get through.
So it isn't the new courtroom or alignment of where courtrooms are in the building, which they still do want. It's more of, the security aspect.
Thank you. Commissioner LeGrand, I think, is next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on the courthouse, so the expansion that is referred to is just a security expansion? The 1.5 million for 63rd District Court expansion?
We do descriptions of the projects?
Yeah, okay. Well, go ahead and explain it. We're kind of in a flow on something.
So basically, the expansion is to add another courtroom where the current magistrate is set. And so then the magistrate would move into the existing unsecured courtroom because the magistrate usually doesn't see in custody clients. So then that way we'll put her in that place. So we're kind of reusing some of the structure, but we'll still have to expand it and keep the security aspect of it.
And it's not their ultimate plan in the court, right? They would like to see more there.
Yes.
So,
Okay, yeah, I just,
If I could mention one other background thing, when we built that building, one of the goals was to have 3 different traffic patterns in the building. One was for residents, people who were going to view trials. One was for staff, and one was for those, for prisoners who are being brought in. You might recall that in the old Hall of Justice that was across the street that was removed for the convention center, we had an issue where a police, Grand Rapids police, not an officer, I had to remember, it was an officer, a detective or what, but went into the courtroom, went upstairs and shot his wife, who was a judge, to death. And so that caused a rethinking of how we do traffic patterns in courts. And so the idea is, with the courts that we've done, we've maintained that traffic pattern. And in fact, I brought that thinking to Ottawa, and the 3 projects we did when I was there, we used that same thinking for staff, visitor, and prisoner traffic patterns. So this kind of keeps us within that design.
and I just had one follow-up about, sorry, the courthouse. There's a lot of items for the courthouse, and I'm just wondering, like, looking at the roof preservation and the weatherproofing, are these expected facilities expenses? Are they unexpected? Or, are they at the end of their lifespan, or is this like, an unexpected expense?
We've been submitting that one as a capital improvement project for at least 5-6 years to get that done. And so it's pushing it down, because it comes up to priorities. And we're at that point now where we need to do it, or it's going to be.
The question is there a schedule for when these things need to happen?
Yes, and we've had it on there, but it just keeps getting, but yes, we have a plan now going forward for all county roofs. And that's where Tim has helped giving us that vision to say, okay, we're going to start scheduling these more, all of the buildings instead of just a few at a time.
Okay, thank you.
Public services announcement, I've been informed, and Commissioner Sparks have discovered that lunch is here, so if you wish to go get some lunch and come back and eat it at your seat, please feel free to do so. Call on Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to budgets, I just want to echo what Commissioner Bujak said, that I think this is great to have this kind of forum early on in the process. I think it's a excellent addition to the whole process. So thank you. There's kind of two angles of, are we doing the right stuff, with our taxpayer dollars, and are we doing stuff right? And I just want to express, my appreciation, that to all the staff, Al, you mentioned reading the Public Budget Act of 1968 to figure out if we're doing stuff right. And I just appreciate that on all of those logistical details and all of the various, legal frameworks and everything that you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It does seem to me that it's going to be a bit chaotic here for a few months with different requirements, coming down on grant applications from the federal government, state government, et cetera. So as much as we can be just prepared, in terms of knowing what's what and having that list of, all the grants and all of that, so that we can react quickly to forces outside of, our particular control. I think that would be good. On the question of doing the right stuff with our money, that really the taxpayer money, I do have this just growing sense of as it's this weird kind of cultural thing that we view house prices going up as a good thing, and we don't do that with anything else. Gas prices went up, and I've got a full tank of gas, yippee! So it's kind of this interesting dynamic. But for most people, there is no immediate positive benefit of like their house appreciating in value. And I think with the inflationary pressures and everything of the last, 3-4 years on housing values, if I recall, I think our projections were like a 4.5% increase or something, but actually it's, probably coming in around like 5.2 or somewhere around there, like just with the Proposal A impacts and all of that. So there's just lots of members of our King County community that I think are having difficulty with, the various costs that have gone up in the last few years, and their family income has not gone up similarly. And so this is something that I'm just thinking about a lot, is like, is there something we can do to not absorb every potential dollar that we could take from people, because a lot of families just don't have those extra dollars to year after year see their property tax bill go up 5% or more if they move and have a major jump. So I think I don't have anything specific to say on it today, but like I do think we need to consider what we can do, not to make our revenues go down, but maybe not to take every potential dollar that we could, based on those inflationary pressures and everything from the last few years. So
I like your comparison between gas prices and housing, because where people get hit the most on housing is when it becomes uncapped. So when you buy a new house, we've been in our house since 2007, so haven't really faced much in the way of tax increases. But with gas, obviously, it hits you right now. It's in your face, and that is a huge impact on people as well. So I'm not minimizing it, but it does impact those who are trying to buy a house or, yeah.
Okay, Commissioner DeBoer is next.
Thank you, Chair. So I was looking at some of these figures, and I realize we have wonderful parks, and I realize that they're going to obviously ask for more capital improvements than other departments, but that dollar sign was a little bit more than what I'd be comfortable with, especially in comparison to when the Sheriff's Department, I know those facilities need updating. I know there's a lot we need to do there. So my comment is, especially in a time right now where we're looking at potentially, having to cut some of these services that we're providing and try to cut the fat a little bit, I'm questioning the wisdom of doing so many capital improvements on services that aren't tied to necessarily mandated services. And so I don't know if there's anything we can do to pause or lessen some of those projects, but I'm a little bit concerned about that dollar sign and just how much would be going into our parks. I love our parks. I think they're great, but in this time where we're pressured to look at those dollar signs a whole lot more, that's just a concern that I have.
Commissioner Hennessy is next.
Following up, can you refresh my memory on what the allowable uses are for the Sheriff's Department millage? And how that, might interface with this list of requests?
Yeah, it's correctional facility operations and CIP. Is there anything above and beyond that? Paying for debt for capital improvements. So it can pay for operations, for capital improvements, and also debt necessary for capital improvements.
So some of the Sheriff's Department projects, which were considerable, could be listed under the millage? Could be paid for under the millage?
Some of the capital projects are paid by the millage and some are paid by the general fund, depending, because obviously costs keep going up in the correctional facility as well. And so if those costs exceed more than the increase in the millage, and there would be less taken out of capital out of the millage and more out of the general fund for the capital for the correctional facility.
Great.
Typically, what we do is, so the sheriff submits their projects, just like all of the other departments. They're ranked according to the other projects. And then once the list is determined, what we do is we transfer money in from the correction detention millage to cover the entire general fund budget, including all the capital transfers. So it's kind of we don't purchase any capital directly out of that correction detention fund. We transfer it to general fund and pay for some of these projects, but they're ranked the same as the rest of the capital, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So we take the bond payment right off the top and then transfer into general fund to cover not only their operations of the correction facility, but any of the capital that's determined to be necessary.
Good, Commissioner? Okay. Commissioner Womack.
I had two questions. When we look at the parks, and I saw we had some $10 million projects, no, that's.
Saw that one too, huh? 10 million at Kaufman.
Are we gonna get, any sessions that may just cover what the parks are before we end up voting on some of that? Because there's a lot going on with the parks, and I wasn't here last year, but I do remember some great presentations on the 3 terms that I did serve. But are we gonna get any updates, or should we do some reviewing on our own to catch up with?
As far as what capital expenses are going to what park or what, we can certainly get that
Park
information
developments, yes.
shortly to you. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the balance, of course, is that parks are at an all-time high popularity after COVID, because that's where people fled to get out of their house for a little bit. And so, as the fastest growing county, or very close to it on most days in the state, that's one of the things that can build quality of life. And so, but it is non-mandated.
Yeah,
It's true. And so it could be outbalanced by something else that is mandated. I mean,
And I'm very supportive of the parks, but it's also good for our constituents. They ask, hey, what did you do out there with 10 million? What did you do there with 9 million? You know, just knowing a little more of the specifics. Hey, we built a playground. You know, a lot of times when they give us a presentation, we get to hear a lot of great things that are happening at our parks that we can share with our constituents.
So in relation to that, we'll do again what we have in the past several years, is have the department directors present that day when we present the actual recommended capital budget, and they'll go over all their highest priority projects at that time in detail with you guys. So that's still in the plan. I'm sorry?
ARPA allocation.
There's still ARPA allocation, yeah, for the Greenway projects in there too, so.
Oh,
And a lot of these typically would come with some sort of matching dollars, either with the locals or grants. So they are very large ticket dollar items in parks, but a lot of times they're seeking external funding for that as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Faber is next.
I was on the same wavelength as Commissioner Hennessy. So what I understand, maybe, and maybe I'm wrong here, so the sheriff capital improvement projects that are in this capital improvement plan may or may not be covered by the correctional millage, or how would we?
The correctional millage funds for the capital are put in the general fund and then spent through the CIP.
And does that still count towards or against our 0.2 mil?
So it's an independent calculation, really. So we transfer a lot more in from the correction detention fund to cover the correction detention expenses, just operational expenses. So they're not directly tied to capital. Again, we get our final plan developed. We see we need $10 million, let's say. So then we calculate what we can transfer from the correction detention. I mean, the operations of the detention, correction detention center are well more than what we could transfer annually from the fund. So there's plenty of room there. We typically will transfer, I want to say $10 to $12 million in. We pay the debt and then we make the transfers in, but I think the correction detention operations are $30, $40 million. So it's not a direct one-to-one correlation, but it's a lot of moving pieces, and I understand it's complicated.
Well, that's a key point that I want to make sure everybody understands, is that if the correction millage were greater than what it took to operate and pay for the capital, we couldn't legally do it the way we're doing it. I mean, but since the operations are so much larger than the amount of the millage, that's why it's transferred the way it is and spent the way it is. So it isn't enough to pay for the operations alone of the correctional facility.
Thank you. And then just one.
Yep.
One more. Again, with parks, at least at the county level, we don't have, say, a dedicated millage to support parks, and that's why we see them in this CIP as much as we do. A question, and at risk of opening up a can of worms, with the leisure tax that was just supported, is there any restrictions in the future, not saying this year, but in the future where that lodging and excise tax could be applied to our park system?
I don't believe it could. It could be applied to the zoo, but I don't believe it could be applied to the park system.
Okay.
Unless you have any other.
Nope, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Look forward to changing that.
Well, there's some people about an hour to the east that would have to concur with that, so.
Since we're on parks, I'm going to butt in real quick and just say, this total for parks under CIP through 30 is 64.5 million. The grand total on here through 30 is 146 million. So we're looking at 44% of that is potential outlay for parks. I don't see how we're going to accomplish that outside of additional revenue for that area, but do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that as we look out into the future, we haven't calculated what a DNR trust fund grant might look like in 2029. And so, each year when those projects come up, there's an eye to look at what grant programs or what other funding sources could be brought to bear.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Pakla is next. And then I have Morales and Bujak. Does anybody else want to get in line now while I'm updating my list? Teal. Okay, great. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the spirit of continuous improvement of this process, I really appreciate this document that we're seeing here. I went back through my emails from last year on the process and noted that in March and April last year, we got this document plus the descriptions of each of these.
Yes.
I'm wondering if some of the questions today seem to be around what is that project as a description perspective. I'm wondering if at the start of this process in the future might be useful, or even as a follow-up to this.
I'll have it in my weekly this week.
Awesome, thank you.
You'll have descriptions of each one.
Yeah, I think that'd be great, because I think a lot of these questions are around, what's the scope of that project,
Yes.
so that we can, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Morales.
Thank you, Chair. I just also want to second the thank you for just this very thorough document. And I also want to echo some of Commissioner Womack's sentiments regarding just how important parks are to constituents. Like you mentioned before, that they've become one of the most popular things that we offer. I'm wondering if, I'm not asking to defund them, but I'm wondering if in some places where maybe instead of replacing an entire pavement, maybe we could just repair it. That way we can still accomplish some of those goals without spending a buck ton of money. But also, Commissioner Kalman mentioned, I know that a lot of people, cost of living are getting higher, and then people are going to be leaning more towards these free recreational activities. So I just think it's great that we are investing in the parks, and thank you for that.
Thank you. And to your initial comment, we do a thorough evaluation on whether we can fix it instead of replacing it. And so there's that whole thing where you get past the point of, it's like when the city increased their income tax for roads, and you'd say, oh, they're going to throw the money into the worst roads, but they put them into the average roads to prevent them from becoming the worst roads, because if you catch it soon enough, you can save money. So that's the kind of thinking that we use with pavement.
Commissioner Bujak.
Thank you, Chair. This information's great, but I'm missing a point of reference on some of these things. And I don't know if you talked about there being a cap on departments on how much they can increase on an annual basis. But say, for example, right here, I got this number in front of me for facilities management total, $7,953,000. I don't have a point of reference. If it was $6,500,000 last year, and now we're asking for $7,953,000, well, then that would represent an increase of, say, 21%. And I would be looking at it and saying, oh, that's quite a bit. Why is there an increase of 21%? At which point you could say, well, that increase includes a not cost of living, but inflation factor, and be reminded that at your August meeting, the Board of Commissioners decided to take on indigent defense, which then caused us to something, and that line item for that decision that the board made is reflected here. And so you are seeing a 21% increase from last year to this year, and the reason being, and somehow justify that increase.
Well, I think that your thinking is perfect when you're thinking of operational budget, but in terms of capital budget, if the 2025 budget was 6 million and something and the 2026 budget is 7 million and something, those are different projects. And so it isn't like a correlation of, whoa, wages went up by this amount, or it's more, these projects were done in 25 and now we have new projects in 26. And so there isn't a correlation necessarily in the increase.
Okay, so I guess then it's the total pot that we would be looking at is all these, the final line item here is
Right.
20 million. Last year, it was 19.5. So we're looking at a 3.5% increase from year to year, not 50% or 20% or.
Which is over the minimum of the 0.2 mils. And so, right, it's
So there is a
basically-
cap.
There isn't really a cap, other than we have to fit the budget pieces together, operations and personnel and CIP. And so we try to take care of what absolutely must be done and then balance everything out.
I appreciate you including everyone in this dialogue. Thank you.
Commissioner Teal?
Thank you, Chair Green. I just had a question, because I know we're looking at our facility replacement plan, and so I'm looking through some of these, and I see a major expansion at the 63rd District Court. I see multiple health department renovations, and then the big one is I see a correctional building renovation looks like it's being requested in 2027 for 37 million. So these are major facility projects. While we're doing our facilities, are we looking at, or can we have some sort of picture of our overall facility changes? Because I feel like if we have all of these facility renovation projects going on at the same time, in my house, I can renovate the kitchen and I need to wait, and then I can renovate the basement. I feel like all of these, the way that they're laid out, we're gonna be renovating everything at once, and it's gonna be a huge cost to our taxpayers. So I guess I'd like maybe an overall facilities look, so that we can plan these out.
We can do that, and
Okay.
that's what this is attempting to do. But
Okay.
yes, I hear you. And so we had targeted 40 million of strategic funding for the new building. So it may be that, yes, you're right. I mean, we could show you what those are and then where we likely see funding coming for them.
And do I read that correctly, that the jail is gonna request all 37 million from the capital improvement plan in 2027?
That is the current plan, yes.
Yeah, and you'll notice this is very lumpy, to your point. These aren't a 2% increase, but they're very lumpy. And obviously, our capital improvement program can't support a $37 million jail expansion. So that would have to be some sort of other funding, like a bonding project or something like that, to be able to include that. But it's good to get them on the list to know these are things coming up in the future. And obviously, I mean, the total this year was 20.1 million. We don't have 20.1 million to spend. So that's why we get through the rankings. We come up with the amount our general fund can support, and then we put those forward for recommendations. And then future years, we do similar, but it's good to have all these projects on the list to know at some point these are going to have to be addressed, so.
And since we're already renovating the Fuller campus, I mean, would it be appropriate to look at multiple facilities on that same site for the same bonding process, or could we look at it for maybe its advantages or disadvantages to our taxpayers in terms of savings?
We certainly could. We have to update, if we're going to renovate the other building, we have to update the notice of intent anyway. So it's all in that description of projects in the notice of intent. We can include whatever we want in there as long as it's a legally bondable project, but yeah.
And maybe it doesn't work, but I guess I just would like us to take a look at that.
Yep, makes sense.
Thank you, Commissioner. I had a question on the admin building and probate court paperless initiative at 1.1 million. Can we get a little more information about what that is? When I was a kid, going paperless meant you were saving money. Sometimes you gotta spend money to save money. I get that, though.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tim Beck, IT Director. Yeah, it's really, it's a good question. And what you're seeing there is really, I think, a combination of two CIP requests that we blended into one. So one of those requests for about $600,000 was for the admin building as we got ready to move to a new facility. What did it look like to implement workflows, paperless workflows, and then the back scanning to get rid of legacy documents as we got ready to move to a new facility, wherever that might be. The second one that was submitted that we blended together came directly out of probate court and their desire to essentially do the same thing, but really get rid of legacy paper. In total, if you look at the work that's already being done at 17th Circuit Court in conjunction with the clerk's office and their Operation Paperless, there's a lot of leverage we're gaining across the county. And I think what you're seeing is a lot of traction. So it's bigger than just this building now. People are starting to look countywide. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I'm certainly supportive of the intent here. I just want to get a little more for clarification. It's a big figure, but that makes a lot of sense. I think it will be a pretty significant savings on the back end when we get to that point, so.
Yeah, it's a good question. And really, there's two elements to going paperless that we always talk about. First, you have to stop the bleeding, right? We have to stop generating paper. And the second part of the, exactly right. And the second part of that is then let's get rid of what we've already generated. Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Tim.
You're right.
Maybe one additional comment would just be that we toured the catacombs underneath this building. That's the best way I can describe them, which is a large number of rooms that are full of paper, different departments, different areas. There must be something about government people and a fear of throwing things out, because there's a lot of things that we could throw out. So one of our plans is we have a team forming so that as we move to Fuller, we don't just store all that we're going to basically use the state retention schedule as a guide. I mean, we're supposedly using it right now, but we're still keeping a lot of stuff in some areas. And basically purge all that, so that we don't move it, we don't keep storing it. We're also going to go through our sections of the archives to make, because some of the things have been stored there as well. And so that'll take a lot of work, but our goal is at the time we move that we will have purged the catacombs.
Does your team include Marie Kondo? Would it bring you joy? That's great, and I hope that we're looking at places. I know we've got stuff we have to retain by law, but if there's archives or records that go back far enough that the museum or the library would want to keep historical records for us, that kind of thing, maybe we can partner with them there too.
I like to tease Jeff because we have a room full of, old green bars, financial reports. I mean, there are some things that we very clearly can just,
Yeah.
Chair, can we go back to the last slide? Do we have that in front of us instead of this?
Yeah, it was helpful.
We can do that.
That'd be great, thank you.
I don't have anybody in line.
This
Are there
one?
Others?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Do you have a question on that, Commissioner, or maybe in a minute?
No, I just
Okay.
want to see it again.
Commissioner Oliver King, go ahead.
We will send you this PowerPoint too, in my weekly note. So they have that, you'll have the description of these, and we'll put this in there too, so you have it electronically.
Al, so I just want to make sure that I have a clear understanding. When I look at the last page, 911 dispatch, we won't do any upgrades until 2027, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a reason why we're waiting to 2027? I would think 911, in terms of dispatch calls.
It's really when they requested it.
That's when they projected it needing to be done, yes.
Right, so part of it is requests. You could see something in an out year if it isn't critical and we can't afford it in that year. Or departments are looking ahead and saying, we're going to need this in 27, 28, 29, 30. So in this case, it just matches how it was requested.
Okay, so all of those that are listed further years out is based on when the department requested that information,
When
requested
they
that
believe,
upgrade?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Burrow.
Thank you, Chair Green. Just as I was walking back in, I know Chair Green mentioned about the parks, $60+ million. Sitting in my district is in District 8 is Kaufman, and I see a $10 million master plan redevelopment there. is that something that can kind of be expanded on as far as?
You guys have any input? Well, okay, yeah, we can expand on it, you'll get the description.
Swayze's here if you want.
Ben's here.
Yeah.
All right, Ben.
He's volunteering, so.
We just had people kind of filtering in and,
Yeah.
okay.
Hi, Ben, welcome.
Great, thank you. So we did have a master plan done for Kaufman Golf Course back in 2020 that significantly enhances the existing course, adds some existing buildings. You'll have to remember that we also treat this as part of our long-term planning process as well. I don't think there's any idea from the Parks Department staff that there's going to be general fund dollars going into that project, right? But as was mentioned earlier, we're always chasing grants, we're always chasing external funding opportunities. And a lot of those grant providers, a lot of those foundations, a lot of those funders don't want you making up projects to grab their dollars, right? So we pre-plan all of these projects. And if you look at Kaufman, every year when this plan comes up, it gets moved back another year. It gets moved back another year. Because we know when it comes to general fund allocations, based on the ranking criteria and just a limited amount of money that's available, that's never going to be a recommended project. But when we go to those private funders, when we apply for those grants, we can show that we have been planning for this process. We didn't make this up to just grab your grant funds, and that there's a significant funding deficit in order for us to be able to accomplish that.
Was that specific for the park itself, or is that specific to the golf course?
So that is specific to the golf course. So any improvements to Palmer Park would be more in the vein of what we would attempt to utilize general fund capital improvement dollars for.
$10 million to the private sector is significant investment where they would go bankrupt real quick in that industry.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think it's well known, I have a philosophical difference with us being involved in the golf business. And I have mentioned other uses there that I think would be absolutely fantastic. That would be a great use instead of the golf course.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I'll add on that we're coming up on the City of Grand Rapids just made I don't know what, just recently, I guess in my head, made a pretty significant investment in Indian Trails, the other main municipal course in town. I think if we're going to look at down the road, that kind of an investment at Kaufman, it probably is as good a time as any to evaluate whether the county should be in the golf business. The benefit to the public notwithstanding, I love Kaufman, great course, fun to play, but it's something we should probably look at as we approach that number. So I'll come back to you, Commissioner Oliver King. Commissioner DeBoer.
Thank you, Chair. Ben went away, but I have a question. What's the parks automation project?
So this is a continuation of a project that's actually, we're kind of undergoing right now. So we've identified two areas where we think we can provide some automation and reduce some of our operations costs. The first is automatic gates for our parks. So there are a lot of parks, a majority of the parks that we do close at night. Some of them we do close in the off-season. Especially the ones that are open and closed on a daily process, we essentially have to send a seasonal employee out there because they're a remote park that doesn't have full-time staffing. And it's been demonstrated in multiple park districts throughout the state that automatic gates work. And in fact, we have a project going on right now down at Creekside Park, putting in our automatic gates, and that'll be our first demonstration project just to make sure it works for us from an operation standpoint. The second half of that is automated mowers. So think of basically a Roomba for your park rather than for your living room. That one's a little bit more complicated. We're also again, funded through the CIP last year. We're doing a demonstration project for that as Creekside as well. That one is going to be a little bit more proof in the pudding. There's obviously a lot of things that could go wrong down there. But again, there are entities that are doing it right now. So if you go to the Michigan State campus, whether on the campus or on their golf courses, you'll see 12 to 24 automated mowers throughout the area. So I think there's a little bit more for us to prove that that works for us before we further implement that, but we've identified at least 2,000 parks where gates or automated mowers or a combination of both, we think can save us some significant money.
Thank you. And I do see a line item here for various parks automated gates. Is that also, that's right now, or?
Yep, so that's
Okay.
another step. So that's the step 2 of the gate project. So you've identified 3 more parks that in pretty short order because they already have electric there. They already have the gates and just need the motor mechanisms that we can pretty cheaply do that. And the return on investment for those 3 were anywhere between 2 and 4 years, so.
Okay, and then a follow-up question to, now I just lost it. I couldn't think of it. Oh, mowers. Are they, is that expected to give us some cost savings then down the road?
Yeah, definitely. So in some areas, it gives us an opportunity to reduce or move seasonal staff, but we have 43 parks spread out throughout the county. It always amazes me how long it takes me to get from, my office to some of these parks. But it's the same way with our maintenance areas too, right? So each one of the 10 maintenance areas has a home place, and they have satellite parks that they have to go out to. Some of them, because of the staffing levels and because of the distance, we still have third-party mowers that go out in some of our areas. So we're really focusing on, for that, we're only focusing on the areas where we see some of those cost reductions.
Thank you.
So just a clarification on the gates. What happens if your car is on the wrong side when it closes?
Yep, so there's a area on the inside, right? So 10 o'clock comes, the gate closes, you're already in there, you come out. There's essentially in some of them, it's a camera system. I think in some of them, it'll have to be a pad because the limited Wi-Fi in the area. But basically, you pull up, the gate opens, and you can get out. So it's all automated.
Typically, there's a deputy waiting for you, Commissioner. If you're
But so that is.
Technology.
Yeah. So that is an issue right now, right? We have several parks where, for some reason, the gate gets locked and there's a car inside. There's a phone number that they call. We have a staff person that takes that call at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. They send somebody out to unlock the gate. So there's a staff cost involved in us allowing people out of the parks when they've accidentally been locked in.
Can I still have the floor? I have another question.
You relinquished it.
Well, Stan,
I'll come back to you. Commissioner Albert King's been waiting for a minute. I'll come back to you, Katie. Go ahead, Lisa.
I'm okay, Katie, go ahead.
Okay.
Ask your question and I'll-
it's a
Okay,
quick
great.
one. I promise it's quick.
Okay.
Because I didn't forget it.
Admin
Thank you.
shower replacement, what's that about, Al?
So you probably don't know, but there is actually a shower in the basement of this building. And
Now you tell us.
people that run or on their lunch hours, I've used it extensively in the past, but it's kind of disgusting, I'm not gonna lie. It's one big room.
Well, it'll be for the prosecutors.
It's one big room with 8 shower heads and a big changing room, so they're looking at making those more individualized and lockable. Right now, there's a men, women's sign you slide, so it's, and we can give you a tour if you'd like, but.
I'll just give it to Lisa now, I guess.
Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead.
Okay, back to the parks. So I know that this is probably a question I shouldn't ask because it's all about priorities, but the reality is there are many families who do not have playscapes. They can't afford to send their kids to, the parks make a huge difference for them. And so to see that, I mean, I don't understand why, at least given what was, for example, at the zoo, the playscape was basically just, it couldn't be used. It wasn't safe. It was awful. And, but I'm seeing playscapes, all of that kind of stuff, not until 2027. Not a park or two could be done this year? In terms of the playscape, the campgrounds, like I said, the parks are public. I love the parks. And when I think of families that I work with in my nonprofit job, the parks are all they have in terms of recreation and entertainment. Family. Aren't they worth now or next year?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So, and I will start out by saying we're actually replacing 6 playgrounds this year.
Okay, good. I'm
So,
relieved.
But we have probably 50, 55 playgrounds in our system. We have been fortunate enough that we've been able to replace those on a regular cycle. So all of the playgrounds appear in the plan at a 20-year cycle, so we'll replace it no matter what. Our first priority is always replacing playgrounds that have been damaged to the point. So you may have recalled, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, somebody took a firecracker and blew up the playground at Fowlsburg. So we replaced that prior to that 20-year. But we will never, you'll always see when the current year CIP for the parks come, it's typically things like playground replacement, trail repaving, parking lots, restrooms, really maintaining our current stuff. That is our focus, though our wish list is very large as well.
And the 6 that you're doing now, that's coming out of some other fund?
Nope,
Or that has already been allocated for?
it's already been allocated.
Okay.
So we're replacing the 3 playgrounds at Wabasis. We're replacing the playground at Meyer Lake. We are placing the main playground at Millennium Park, and there's one other one that slips my mind right now.
And then I'm just curious, and maybe it wouldn't be in this plan, but are you, again, I'm thinking about our experience with the zoo, about trees and plants and all of that kind of stuff. I don't see any replacement of dead trees or adding native plants or any of that kind of stuff. Is that something that's not included in this budget?
Yep, so that's all included in our operational budget.
Okay.
So sometimes we'll have big projects, but then we also have a lump sum of money just to replace trees in general, so.
Okay. And then maybe, my last question, maybe I overlooked this, but in terms of lighting of the parks, like when it gets dark and people are on our trails at night, is that included in this, or did I overlook it?
So we don't have any specific lighting projects that we're working on right now. So all of the lighting that exists is maintained through the operations budget. Typically, we'll add a lighting as part of a project, right? So the most recent example is when we got our brand-new shiny admin building, and then we did the naturalization of the North Kent Trailhead, where the trailers were removed. We added lighting into that. So, we did a project up at Dwight Lydell. While it's not pathway lighting, we added lighting to the wheel up there to kind of enhance that. So additional lighting will typically come as part of a project.
And this will be my last one. So do we, I'm also thinking about ADA compliance and, signage. It's in English, but it's also in other languages. Is that coming out of your operation budget?
So again, it would depend on where the project is. So, if we had a project that was in the CIP, making sure that it's ADA accessible, that's the minimum, right? We're striving for universal accessibility. Right now, we're working on a CIP that was approved as part of last year's project to do comprehensive signage on all of our regional trails. So understanding ADA and making sure it's multiple languages is all built into that project. So while you wouldn't usually see a specific line item, it is part of the overall project that's going in. Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Real quick, there is
Go ahead.
2 projects in here, 53 and 55 also, that is for playground replacement to be considered in this plan too, so.
Thank you, Jeff. I wanted to see if we could wrap in the next 10 minutes, try to keep this to about, I think that's about 90 total. It's been a long morning, but if others have questions, please feel free to ask them. Go ahead, Commissioner Pakla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Al, you mentioned that one of your goals for this was to sort of start to get a sense of what board priorities might exist that are not on this document. And one of the things that I'm interested in exploring is this notion of how might we invest in things now that will save us costs in the future, right? Commissioner DeBoer asked the questions about how the automated mowers might provide us some cost savings in the future. And when we pair that with the conversation around parks and playgrounds, one of the main reasons why playgrounds have a time limit is because manufacturers stop creating parts for those things, right? And so an example of what I'm thinking about here would be, are there systems that we could invest in now that would allow us to not be beholden to manufacturers phasing out processes in the future, right? I'm thinking large-scale industrial 3D printers that could print parts for us. That type of thing could be really interesting, both from a parks perspective, but also from a facilities perspective. Those things might be cheap right now. I don't know what's going to happen in the future in terms of costs for various things that are made with various types of materials, right? Not suggesting that that is a high priority, but I'm interested in, as we look at potential cost savings, either known or projected for those kinds of projects, that might be an interesting thing as we're thinking about being the best stewards of our taxpayers' money as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. You have something, Jeff?
Yeah, real quick. That is one of our scoring criteria when we look at them, ongoing operational costs, and does it have savings? And that's one of the blanks on the form that they submit. So we do look at that.
And just to clarify, ongoing operational costs could include future operational savings, not just like, is it going to cost money?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I
Thanks.
think your point too is to be thinking of things, even as a executive staff and board, what are some of the things we should be looking into that have a broad brush on many county operations?
Yeah, and it may be pulling from, where are we spending the most with our vendors on parts kind of thing, and is there an alternative to those kinds of spends?
Thank you. Commissioner Oliver King.
Just one, I'm serious now, just one last question about parks, okay? Do you guys update the grills? Again, families that we work with through our nonprofit who, their kitchen may not be functional, their utilities may be turned off. They go to the parks and they may grill food there, whatever. Do you upgrade those kind of things?
We do. I mean, fortunately, the grills tend to last a long time, so, but we consistently update the grills, and we try to put new ones in periodically as well. Again, so that's something, a new grill, might cost $2,500 rather than $25,000, so it won't appear in this budget, it'll appear in the operations budget, but we have things for like benches and grills and all of those amenities that typically come along with the park, but we try to make sure at a minimum each one of the picnic areas and shelters in the system has a grill associated with it. While those are things that can be rented, I'd say probably 75% of the time they're not rented. So then they're just open to the public to use as they want to. So, and they get used very often.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to make this last call. Anybody who would like to speak still ask questions. I will add that this has been a good discussion. I know that Al's door and phone are open, as are mine, as are Commissioner Teal's as the budget chair, finance chair. So please share any feedback you have offline with us as we go through the next steps of this process. Al, do you have anything to wrap up the meat of the agenda here?
I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, that was a really good session. I appreciate the input. As you think of things, please just let me know, or as you said, the two of you, so.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We have moved to item 3, which is public comment. Any member of the public that wishes to speak? Welcome back, Dee.
How y'all doing? Blessings and positive energy to all y'all. I'm actually, it was a couple things. So I am working with you guys on the Youth Justice Influence League. Obviously, you guys can look on the news and all of these different publications and seeing the impact that I've had on the community. But next to the juvenile detention is the juvenile service facility. And I was told that we couldn't bring one of the people from Fox 17 to the basement because they haven't fixed up some things in the basement at the juvenile service facility. So I'm asking you guys, so we'd be able to eventually put an esports lab in the basement to actually educate the youth that's in the justice system on streaming and shoutcasting and really advancing the program and initiative that I have. I'm actually going to get some funding from Steelcase to build this lab, and I don't care who utilizes it. I don't even care to keep the stuff. I just want to really have the impact and things like that. But I'd like you guys to invest in updating the basement of the juvenile service facility so I can be able to build this esports lab so we can really be able to do some innovative stuff. I know you guys care about the justice system and having a fair justice system that works for everyone and regardless of their ethnicity. And so I'm asking you guys this. Also, with me speaking about the PFT, the Play Fuel Token, our digital currency. I know that the city of Detroit is the first city, the largest city in America to actually adopt cryptocurrency for their fees, for their taxes, and things like that. I think Kent County and the city of GR should look into this. I mean, I am going to be speaking to the United Nations. I love coming to Kent County Board because Fox 17 heard me speaking about me going to United Nations, and now they want to interview me about this. So I'm unapologetically going to do this, and I know that you guys are going to hear this all across. I think I give really good advice. I think I can give some advice that can really help a government. I believe I can run the country. I believe at this age of 30 years old that I can run the United States or another country. But I'm really asking you guys to look into crypto because obviously with our federal government and Donald Trump doing what he does, it's having an effect on the government and our county governance and the things that you guys want to do, regardless of how you identify on what side of the aisle. It's affecting the work of Kent County, and I don't like that. And so I'm asking you guys to look into digital currency, look at the benefits, look at the different state legislators and senators that are across the states that are actually creating Bitcoin strategic reserves and things like that, even though the Fed Chair Powell was really not into creating the federal version of this, but it has a lot of significant benefits. I'm going to be a billionaire one day, and I love for Kent County to have those revenues and things that they can utilize because it's continuously growing. I know this can truly benefit, and I know I'm going to be rich, and I'd hate to be richer than our county one day. Thank you.
Thank you, DeAndre. Appreciate it. Anybody else for public comment? I don't see any. Miscellaneous, I have one really briefly. She's going to not want me to do this, but I wanted to acknowledge Regina McMillan. I failed to do so in our main board meeting with all the excitement today, but she is leaving Kent County to pursue new opportunities. And we're very happy for her, despite the booing. So we want to thank you, Regina, for your service. Appreciate it. And I also want to briefly thank everybody, including Regina and the rest of the staff that helped coordinate a lot of folks coming to visit us today. We appreciate that. Any other miscellaneous from the board? I don't see any. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.